Okay, so the next lesson is actually kind of a review, but I'm going to link it back to the triangle concept from the last lesson. And guys, most of this is a review of stuff that we've talked about, okay, just to kind of get you used to what's going on in our kind of unique situation here. And I want you to do the best that you can, okay? Please take this seriously if you are planning on taking calculus next year, because you've got to be very comfortable with trig, just practice this and be honest about it as you're working through it, okay? All right, so in this lesson, finding any exact trig value in the unit circle, okay? So we covered this before we went on our extended break. Okay, so if I ask you, for example, what is cosine of 120 degrees? Okay, this is kind of the step-by-step process that you need to go through. So make sure that you write that down. Remember, you can always pause the video as I'm speaking so that you can write stuff down. Okay, so the first thing I need to determine is what quadrant I'm in. Then I need to think about what is my reference angle, okay, or what angle is this a multiple of? And then I want to determine my sign being positive or negative, and then the value. Okay, so if I'm looking at cosine of 120 degrees, then 120 degrees, okay, is going to put me in quadrant 2. So this is going to be here. So this would be about 120 degrees, okay? So what I need to know, if I'm thinking about this in terms of the triangle, okay, that I was using last lesson, is what is this angle right here, which would also be the reference angle, okay? So if this is 120 degrees, how many degrees more would I need to turn to get to 180? Well, the answer is 60. Okay, so this is a 60-degree angle. All right, so once I understand what my reference angle is, then I need to determine if I am positive or negative here. Okay, so I'm trying to find cosine, and I know that all students take calculus. So in this quadrant, cosine is going to be negative. So I know that much. And now here's where I need to memorize cosine of 60 degrees. 60 degrees, remember, is the same thing as pi over 3. And so cosine of pi over 3 is the same thing as sine of pi over 6. So this is going to be 1/2. Okay, so I use my little memory trick that I taught you guys for that one. And my answer is going to be negative 1/2. Okay, so you can draw a triangle in and you can think about it that way as well. So if I know that this was a 60-degree angle, okay, and this point right here then was going to be negative 1/2 comma root 3 over 2. I know it's kind of squished in there. I apologize. Okay, but then I could say, all right, well, the y value, this is going to be root 3 over 2. That would be my opposite. This down here would be my negative 1/2 because that would be my x value. I could use Pythag to find this right here if I needed it, which is the hypotenuse. And then I could calculate cosine as adjacent over hypotenuse, and I should still be able to get that. Now, here's the thing, that hypotenuse should be 1 because remember that I'm in the unit circle here, okay, because this is one of those angles that I find in the unit circle. So there's different ways of thinking about it. In all honesty, this is kind of the thought process that I expect you to be able to go through when you're calculating these. And remember that a lot of times I'm not going to be referring to degree measurements. I'm going to be referring to radians. So you need to be able to do that as well. Okay, so here's another example with degrees, and then we'll do a couple in radians. Okay, so if I ask you what is CSC of 270 degrees, I need to know that CSC stands for cosecant, and I need to know that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Okay, so I need to first figure out where this angle is in my unit circle. Okay, so 270 degrees is going to be right here. Okay, so this is 270 degrees, which is the same thing as 3 pi over 2. Okay, and then I need to determine my reference angle. So my reference angle here is pi over 2. Now this isn't as necessary to do a reference angle because I'm on one of those 4 angles that are on the axes, okay, but you can if you want. All right, so then this angle, my reference angle is 90 degrees here if I'm talking about degrees, is at the point 0, negative 1, okay? So this, I wrote the right thing. Okay, yeah, sorry, I was checking to make sure I wrote the right example. Okay, so here, I need to think about this in terms of sine first, and then I can interpret it in terms of cosecant. So I don't really need to do a positive negative assessment here because I'm on the axes. Okay, so remember that that's when I'm in the quadrant, but here I'm actually on the axis. All right, so what would sine of this angle be? Well, sine is the y value. So sine would be -1, but I want cosecant. Cosecant is the reciprocal of that. So if I take -1/1 and I flip it, I get 1 over -1. Hey, guess what? That's still the same thing. Okay, so if I'm on an axis, it's a little bit different, but still the same type of concept. Okay, so tangent of 11 pi over 6. And when I ask you to submit photo evidence of your work, I expect to see something along the lines of what I'm doing here. Okay, I don't want to just see a magical answer. I want to see your thought process. Okay, so when I want to know tangent of 11 pi over 6, well, 11 pi over 6 is going to be right here in my unit circle. Okay, so almost back to 2 pi, but not quite. Okay, so 11 pi over 6 is my angle here. All right, so there's where I'm located, my quadrant. Now I need to know my reference angle. Well, my reference angle is going to be pi over 6. This is a multiple of pi over 6. Okay, it's a 30-degree angle there. And then I need to know my sine. So all students take calculus. So if I'm down in quadrant 4, tangent is going to be negative. And here's where I need to know the value. Okay, so pi over 6, remember on the previous lesson when I talked about tangent, tangent of pi over 6 is √3 over 3. And then remember, the way I remember that is the 2 3's. 3 plus 3 gives me 6. Okay. Tangent of pi over 3 is equal to √3, 1 3 1 3. So I know this is my value, and then I know that it's going to be negative because I'm down here. Oops, I wrote a 2 in quadrant 4. So there's my answer, negative √3 over 3. Now, if I asked you, what is cotangent of 11 pi over 6? Okay, instead of doing this whole process again, I can take this value that I just found, which was tangent of 11 pi over 6, and just invert it. Okay, so cotangent of 11 pi over 6, excuse me, is going to be -3 over √3. Now, of course, I can't leave my answer like that. I have to rationalize, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3. And this is going to become -3 √3 over 3. The 3's are going to cancel, and I'm going to get -√3, which, looky there, is actually tangent of pi over 3. Okay, so tangent and cotangent, those values will flip for those reference angles, pi over 3 and pi over 6.